Here are 10 bad arguments for atheism with 10 much better alternatives.
Today's challenge comes courtesy of Brian Doyle. He offers 10 ways to prove that God doesn't exist. Let's see what he's got. Video guy, please put 3 minutes on the clock, and let's include a fallacy counter, just because. Proof number 1. The fact that a human being has to tell you about the existence of your God proves there's no God. We would be born with knowledge of its existence. The first proof offers the first fallacy. It's called a non sequitur. The conclusion just doesn't follow. Human beings have to tell us about the existence of all kinds of things, but that doesn't prove that those things don't exist.
I think there's a hidden premise in this argument. We are told by apologists that God desires a relationship with us. The fact that he doesn't make himself very easy to believe in is, at the very least, in tension with that assertion. If he wants us to have a relationship with him, and he has the power to put knowledge of himself into all of our brains, it seems very counterintuitive that he would neglect to do so.
For example, teachers tell terrified students about fractions, but that doesn't prove there's no fractions.
Do they also tell the students that fractions are all powerful and want to have a relationship with all of us?
Bad start. Proof number 2. A God belief is simple geography. Being raised in a Christian home decides which God you believe in. This is a textbook example of the genetic fallacy. You cannot invalidate a belief by showing how someone came to hold that belief.
This isn't proof that God doesn't exist, but it is evidence that most religious people are not subjecting their belief to sufficient scrutiny. Most of them did not come to their beliefs by surveying all religions and weighing the evidence for each. This doesn't make any religious belief incorrect, but the probability that any religious belief that is simply absorbed from the social environment is correct is far lower than for a belief arrived at through thorough investigation.
So this proof is about God belief, not about whether or not God exists. Put another fallacy on the board. So much for proof number 2. Proof number 3. There was no time before the Big Bang, so that means that there was no time for a God to exist in or create things in. This challenge mistakenly assumes that God is necessarily a temporal being, that he must exist and act in time.
The idea that any being exists in time is not an assumption, it is true by definition. To exist, to be a being, means to have location in space and time. If something does not have location in time, then by definition it never exists.
But Christians have traditionally held that God is a timeless being, outside of time prior to creation. So there's no proof here.
That's a contradiction. Prior is a temporal orientation. There can be no temporal orientation independent of time. If creation includes all of time, then it is a contradiction to say that anything exists prior to it.
Just a straw man fallacy. Proof number 4. The Abrahamic God cannot exist because it wasn't the first God to be created. There are other gods that have been proclaimed to exist before this God. They can't all be true, so if we can deny the existence of one of these gods, we can use the same method to deny them all.
I'm unaware of any gods that the Bible says existed before the Abrahamic God, but the Bible does talk about the existence of other gods. God said, "Let us make mankind in our image," plural. He made humans not just in his own image, but in the image of gods generally. Since he said, "Let us make mankind," it seems as though the creation of human beings was a collaborative effort between Yahweh and the other gods. There are other passages that mention the other gods in what's called the Divine Council.
If this is a good argument against God, then it's also a good argument against science, since older false concepts are often replaced by newer true concepts. On Doyle's logic, since the older geocentric view is false, we can just deny the newer heliocentric view by the same method.
Well, yes, given that the method is finding a different model that works better, we can deny heliocentrism, and should if we find another model that is simpler and or more consistent with the evidence. This isn't as strong a rebuttal as you think it is.
Of course, this is silly. We should weigh the evidence for each theory and for each God. Another non sequitur on the board.
Yeah, but you don't do that, at least not fairly. You have a clear bias toward your preferred God.
Proof number 5. God either allows the devil to exist and is an accomplice, or it isn't an all-powerful God. An all-powerful and all-loving God wouldn't allow the devil to exist. Isaiah 45:7, KJV. Doyle sets up a false dilemma. It's not an either-or. There's another option. God is all-powerful and all-loving, and God allows the devil to exist because he has good reason to do so.
That actually contradicts the idea that he is all-powerful. In order to have a good reason for letting the devil exist, doing so would not only have to provide an advantage that makes up for its disadvantages, this supposedly all-powerful God would have to lack the power to achieve that advantage without letting the devil exist. Even if letting the devil exist has benefits that outweigh the drawbacks, doing so is still not justified if God has the power to achieve those benefits without letting the devil exist. The only good things that are logically impossible without bad things are things that are not worth the bad things. For example, you can't heal without being injured, but I would rather not be injured in the first place than experience healing.
Which is why philosophically trained atheists have largely abandoned this proof.
Like who? I don't know any atheists who have abandoned this argument. I'm philosophically trained and I haven't abandoned it.
Fallacy, false dilemma. Proof number 6. The God of the Bible is jealous of other gods. This proves that this God is not the only God. With multiple choices, only shows that there is no reason to choose just one. If a God were true, there would be no other options. Exodus 34:14. As a teacher who has given thousands of multiple choice tests over the years, I can say with some authority that multiple choices does not mean that there's no reason to choose just one. There are false answers, just like there are false gods.
When the Bible talks about the divine council, it calls the members Elohim, which means God. It doesn't specify that they are false gods, and given that Genesis strongly implies that creating humans was a collaborative project with the other gods, it seems awfully counterintuitive that he would get them to help if they were false gods.
Another non sequitur. Proof number 7. There is no evidence that spiritual energy exists, so we can conclude that psychics, ghosts, and gods are non-existent. Otherwise, God has nothing to be made of. Not this again. An immaterial being, by definition, is not made of material. I'm not going too quickly here, am I? God is not made of anything. God is spirit.
And what is that exactly? What does it mean to say that spirit exists if it isn't made of anything?
God is spirit, but he's not made of spiritual energy. He's immaterial. So this is a straw man. But Doyle might also be begging the question by assuming materialism, that matter and energy are all that exist.
That's why I'm not a materialist. I believe that space and time also exist.
Proof number 8. There is no such thing as nothing. For nothing to exist...
Huh? Nothing to exist?
would cause it to be something. Creationists believe that God created the universe out of literal nothing. This is an equivocation of the word nothing. By nothing, we mean no thing. That is, God didn't make the universe out of anything.
Which also doesn't make any sense. How do you make something without making it out of anything? How does God get something out of no thing?
We certainly do not believe that God created the universe out of something that's called nothing. So there's no thing here that disproves God.
It disproves creation ex nihilo by pointing out that you can't make something out of nothing.
See what I did there? Proof number 9. This isn't a finely tuned world created with us in mind. The sun gives you cancer, most of the water is undrinkable, and diseases run rampant. If there was an intelligent designer, there wouldn't be any mistakes. First, just because you can't drink the ocean or antifreeze doesn't mean they're not designed. They're just designed for another purpose. Second, something doesn't have to be perfectly designed in order to be intelligently designed.
Why would a perfect designer make an imperfect design?
Third, imperfect design is perfectly consistent with intelligent design in a broken world.
This broken world idea renders claims of a perfect designer non-falsifiable. Anytime some feature of nature helps us, it's evidence of the design of a loving God. When it doesn't, it's the result of the fall. This makes the claim that the world had a perfect designer untestable and therefore meaningless.
Number 9 offers another non sequitur. Proof number 10. Evolution is obviously proven and true. This means that we weren't created by magic and are somehow superior to the animal kingdom. No creator, no God. Biological evolution, even if true, has nothing to do with the existence of God. It has to do with God's alleged role in biology. That's all. If Darwin was right, atheists can still be wrong, as shown by a large number of theistic evolutionists. So this is another non sequitur. Despite what you've been told, evolution doesn't disprove God.
It disproves biblical literalism. If evolution is true, the Genesis account cannot be literally true. everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.